My roots reach deeply. I am connected to the core of me. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's just a 1 minute past the hour. I am going to go ahead and start so that we are mindful of your time. But thank you so much for joining us today for Me, You, Sacred Birth book reading and QA series. This is part one of an eight-part series where I just wanted to spend a little bit of time with you all, about 45 minutes of kind of sharing some passages directly from my new book, Sacred Birth. And you will be able to participate in a webinar style. So thank you so much for joining. You'll be able to participate through Q&A, through chat, through reactions, as well as an anonymous polling. So those instructions are in the chat for you. I do want to say thank you to our host, The Educated Birth. Oh, I'm sorry if there's a reverb. I don't know how to get rid of that because it's just me. It may be, yeah. Thank you for someone saying they don't have it. So it could be if you're Iris, I think I may have seen you twice on here. Yes, excuse me. Iris, you're on here twice. That's probably why you're hearing the reverb. Um, Log out on one of your devices, possibly, because I do see your name twice. And thank you who shared that you did not hear that echo. But thank you to our host, The Educated Birth, Cheyenne Varner, who's the founder and owner of that. And then thank you to Cheyenne and Julia Scott, who's BCR marketing and tech consultant, for facilitating for today. So you should already see on your shared screen, just the initial kind of page with me. I do again want to say special thank you to The Educated Birth. They support you as well, we support you, meaning from The Educated Birth, as you support parents with inclusive teaching, tools for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. The Educated Birth and Cheyenne, they've been partners of ours, collaborative partners, um, accountability of partners too, since 2020. They've been on this journey with us. So I thought it would be just really special for us to collaborate together on the book, because we also collaborated on many other things, including our exhibit together that's at the CDC. Cheyenne has created illustrations for each domain in the SACKRED quality framework, which is what the book is about. So thank you to Cheyenne for that. And please, by all means, support a Black woman-owned business who's creating illustrations I have never seen until she did them, where the anatomical images, and well, it's just images of human beings birthing, look so much more like all of us in this world. So thank you to Cheyenne for your offerings. So to start off, we're going to do a little bit of Menti.com. This is a different way of how I would like to facilitate the engagement online for this virtual book reading and QA series. So in the chat, you'll see instructions about how you can participate. As I shared at the beginning, you can also go to Menti.com on any smart device that you have, or open a separate web browser. When you go to Menti.com, which is also at the top of the slide, you want to enter this code 49605968, because this is how we can all see what we're doing at the same time as you participate in this webinar style book series. So just starting off, just trying to use the two state abbreviations. This is a word cloud. So by asking you to provide the two initials, then if you provide the same two initials, then those who are most represented from that state will be in the center, and everybody else will be around that. So we have 3 people who participated so far. I think there are about 20 plus people online. So whenever the number in this little corner gets to about 15 or so, I will advance the next slide. But thank you for showing up from Virginia, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, South Carolina. And I will keep advancing so that we kind of get through these initial questions. I'm just going to read directly from chapter 1, the first page. And then I'm going to leave a slide open for you to comment throughout the reading with your questions and your comments. Julia and Cheyenne will also be monitoring or watching the chat and the Q&A through Teams, but you can also participate through the Menti.com as well. Thank you to Massachusetts. I think that's MA, yes. California, thank you all for being here. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Keep participating. And if you're just now joining again, please go to Menti.com, enter the code 49605968, and continue to participate with us. This is a question of why are you, excuse the missing word, why are you joining us today? You can type in your responses, and as you type in your response, we will be able to see those responses collectively. And as the responses from each of you fill up the screen will move, and then I can stop the screen or re-begin the movement. But this is another way of how you can participate today. So thank you again for joining. We've already asked for the first question, where are you joining us today? By entering your 2 state abbreviations. And now I'm asking, why are you joining us today? And if you want to comment, please do. And again, your responses will show up on the screen for all of us to see. And if this is too much to do with Menti and Teams, you can also put your responses in the chat for Teams. So thank you to the people who responded. Some people are joining because they want to support this work. They want to join a community. They appreciate my immense wisdom and desire. They have a desire to fill their collective cup during this political time, to learn from me, be in community, to gain a better understanding of how obstetric racism impacts maternity care. This person wrote, so I can learn and be a better midwife, to learn from Dr. Scott. Someone wrote, I am joining to hear reading of Sacred Birth as I have been anticipating the release of this book for about 2 years. Right? Me too. As a Black mama with a Black daughter, I need to. I'm going to scroll down. Hopefully this works. Yes. Someone wrote they are joining because they're committed to birth justice for Black community. Someone else wrote they can't wait to hear Sacred Birth read directly from the source. Thank you for that. And others are joining to support the work. So again, I can see these comments. This is how we're going to participate virtually, so that as you are thinking of things, as you're thinking of questions, you can just type them and they'll just fill the screen. And again, as the comments fill the screen, I can have the screen move up on its own, or I can pause it so that it can, or I can pause it so it doesn't move. I'm going to see if I can unpause it as I learn how to do this. Okay, that was not, sorry. Okay, my bad. We know not to hit the space bar. Okay, let's scroll down if I can do that. Excuse me for doing all this stuff. Here we go. We'll try this yet again. Am I going to not do this right? Okay, my apologies. I want to get us back to the group response. I'm going to keep going. I'll learn this trick later. Okay, here we go. Another question. What one word comes to mind when thinking about quality of care? Try to use one word, because again, if that word is repeated, then the word that's most frequently used by the 20 plus people on this call will be the word that's in the center. And other words will then filter around it. So about 5 people have responded. And again, as you see, your words will show up. I think you can enter multiple times, but please try to use one word that comes to mind when you are thinking about quality of care. And so far, out of the 8 responses, you can see that the largest word, well, it was safety. Now it's switched to equity, which means more people are using those 2 words when they think about quality of care. And then other words that the 9 of you all are using are respect, listen, elusive. Good, I haven't seen elusive before. Wholeness, that is a new word that I haven't seen as well. I'll wait for this little number in the right-hand corner to get to about 15 before I move forward. And you can choose new words. Don't try to people please, just really put whatever comes to mind. I did this last week in Baltimore with the hospital and their community partners. And they had some very, very interesting words to use, and they were not all affirming or positive about quality of care or patient safety. So again, whatever comes to mind when you see the word or hear quality of care. Challenging, yes. Um, so I'll wait for about 2 or 3 more people to respond, and we'll move to the next question, and then I'll start reading. And if not, no pressure, we'll keep going. This will be open, so you can always go back and add more. Okay, another question. Identify one word that comes to mind when thinking about childbirth in hospital settings. And if you were joining now and you had a little glitch, probably this person's from California, I would think, which is our first question. Um, I am progressing and moving it forward. So we're on our, I think, one of the last questions. When thinking about what childbirth in hospital settings, what one word comes to mind? We saw dangerous, we see sterile, we see dehumanized, rushed, routine, restrictive. And again, thank you to the 9 people who are responding. The word that's used most frequently by you all in this anonymous online polling will be the word that's in the center. It'll also be the largest word. So we have about 9 words on screen. So everyone's choosing a different word at the moment, which is great. And the hope of doing this online book reading and using Menti.com again allows you to participate in real time and allows me to also save and archive your responses so that we can pause the screen, look at them, refer back to them, but also I can share these responses with each of the participants. Okay, so thank you for that. I think that's it. Oh, now here are questions, just who's here in the room. I wanted to start off with that. Um, And if your role or the response that best aligns with you does not fit on here, pick the one that's most closely aligned with who you are. What is your primary role? Again, we see practitioner, we see researcher. So as you respond, you'll see your responses in real time, color coded in percentages. So about 8 people have responded. We're at about 11, and about half of the group, almost half, were practitioners, identify as practitioners. We're also seeing folks identifying as an advocate, as a researcher. Their role is not listed. If your role is not listed, please add it to the chat. So we want to make sure that you feel as seen as possible in this virtual anonymous space. Um, I will move on to the next one. What is your racial identity? And I centered Blackness. So either you're going to identify as Black or African American, Black, multiracial, non-Black, multiracial, or non-Black. And I did this on purpose because a lot of times we are not centered. So I wanted to center racializations of identities around Blackness. Um, so right now, the 13 or so people, a little bit over half, are identifying as Black. Some folks are identifying about a third as non-Black. And about 7% are identifying as Black multiracial. Thank you so very much. How you describe your gender, cis or trans, women and men, they're there for that. Gender non-conforming, non-binary, gender queer, gender fluid also responds, as well as my gender identity isn't on the list. We're at about 100% 10 people are identifying as women. Again, inclusive of being trans or cisgender women. Okay, thank you. So here we go. I'm going to put my little timer on. I know 30 minutes is going to be 6:14. I will stay on a little bit after to like 6:30ish. Don't tell anybody. I am going to read just straight through. You can start putting questions and comments actually now if you want to, but I'm going to start my timer. And I'm literally starting from page 1. I'm going to do like 32. Okay, so here we go. I wrote an acknowledgments page, which I will not speak of at this time, but I just want to first say thank you to the 36 Black mothers in Oakland and Los Angeles, California, and to African American Breastfeeding Cultural Outreach Task Force and Black Women for Wellness for being our community partners for this particular work. So here we go. Chapter 1, When Existing Paradigms Never Served Us. In December 2018, Donna Ian Davis first introduced obstetric racism into the lexicon of childbirth experiences among Black women in the United States. Specifically, her ethnographic analysis of U.S. Black women's reproductive care before and after childbirth carefully described mechanisms of reproductive control and domination that manifest as a coordinated set of beliefs, practices, and behaviors imposed upon the Black reproducing body by any healthcare professional. According to Davis, obstetric racism poses a threat to positive birth outcomes, transcending the boundaries of violence captured by obstetric violence and medical racism. Within the global context, Latin American childbirth activists and legal scholars first described obstetric violence in 1993 as consequences of structural violence manifesting as excessive rates of medical interventions, non consented care, disrespect, and other abusive practices enacted against women during childbirth. Within the US, Within the US, medical racism described how the health profession or professional responds to the race of a patient, thereby influencing the diagnostic decision making process and treatment modalities in the broader context of medical provision. Medical racism also requires the racialization of every aspect of every organ of every Black body, thereby placing the patient at risk for inadequate or inappropriate care. While obstetric violence optimally described a form of gender based violence enacted against any obstetric patient, resulting in their subordination because of their positionality as an obstetric patient within the medical industrial complex, obstetric violence fails to take into consideration racial stratification of life and reproduction that track along histories of anti Black racism and eugenics that uniquely impact Black girls and women in the US. Therefore, Davis selected the term obstetrical racism to describe both as as an analytic and phenomenon that embodied an extension of racial stratification and revealed gendered dimensions of medical racism, emerging from histories of stigmatization, other forms of reproductive abuses, experimentation, exploitation, and extraction of Black women in reproductive, gynecological, and obstetric care. From the near eradication of Black grand midwives in favor of white public health nurses and white male obstetricians, and from Black women's memories of encounters and interactions with physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals during and after pregnancy and childbirth. In this book, I explain how and why I chose to define obstetric quality and patient safety during childbirth hospitalization in the US among Black women through the expectations, expressions, experiences of Black women. By defining obstetric patient safety in hospital settings as a manifestation of Black women's anticipated and actual experiences, then Black women's imaginations become the standard by which hospitals and insurance companies measure, monitor, and maintain a certain threshold or quality of care. Essentially, I argue for normalizing Black women's patient report experiences of hospital based obstetrics care as the standard quality metric for evaluating the overall value, performance, safety, and quality of the U.S. maternal health system. By August 2018, I successfully defended my master's thesis in the pursuit of my MPH in applied epidemiology. My thesis research study involved the first ever application of public health critical race methodology by Ford and Erhi Himbua 2010 in a quantitative population health science research study for the purposes of interrogating the racialized social and clinical phenomenon of preterm birth among Black women with gestational diabetes in California and elucidating patterns and predictors of preterm birth based on nativity. My study established a precedent for my current scholarship in terms of ethical, theoretical, and methodological approaches. First, the utilization of PHCR or anti-racist praxis established two fundamental assumptions that remain true and consistent throughout my scholarship. Number one, structural racism creates a hierarchy of human value, knowing, knowledge, power, domination, and privilege based on skin color, genitalia, gender, partner preferences, body ability, and body size in society that impacts the distribution and manifestation of diseases, discomforts, disabilities, health, deaths, and near deaths, as well as differential access to and utilization of resources to meet and maintain basic social needs, such as food, housing, water, family, community stability, employment, and safety. Number two, the second assumption: the structural context and conditions of living as a Black woman in the U.S. impact perinatal and reproductive health and healthcare outcomes and experiences in a manner not reported nor described in white women or foreign born Black women. Second, the intentional decision to exclude white women or any other non Black women as the reference group in my research acknowledges and affirms the complex, nuanced, and rich heterogeneity of Black femininity, Black womanhood, and Black girlhood. Disrupting the practice of prioritizing white women as the reference group in public health and maternal child health research serves as an act of epistemic refusal of race as a biological construct and epistemic resistance against Black bodies and Black womanhood as biologically inferior and socially inadequate. Choosing inclusion and exclusion criteria and sampling techniques that resulted in a study sample of Black women representatives of the African diaspora facilitates within group analysis and subsequent detection of differences to better support customization of care and disease prevention, mitigation, and treatment modalities that consider individual variability in genes, environment, and lifestyle, also known as precision medicine. In 2018, no one in the field of obstetrics and gynecology or obstetric patient safety publicly named racism as the driver of the disproportionate yet predictable, preventable, and unfair rates of deaths and near deaths among Black women in the US. Standard reporting and dissemination practices in public health, epidemiology, maternal child health, medicine, and nursing led to superficial oral and written discussions of mortality and morbidity that emphasize white-Black comparisons. Prior to Davis's introduction of obstetric racism, the existing obstetric quality and patient safety paradigm lacked both scientifically and culturally appropriate frameworks and corresponding topologies, meanings, manifestations, measurements, and metrics by which to register and report harm as defined for, by, and with Black women and girls. Despite quality improvement initiatives, clinical safety bundles, technological advances, and social protection such as higher education, higher income, and marriage between men and pregnant women, current hospital safety programs fail to protect Black mothers and birthing people from harm during and after childbirth. In 2018, the call to action in obstetric patient safety was to simultaneously improve the quality of care and advance health equity during the provision of obstetric care in U.S. hospitals. However, the blueprint for advancing care quality and equity centered primarily on improving care outcomes selected by healthcare, health equity, quality, or patient safety professionals, scientists, data analysts, evaluators, and even economists. The blueprint, formerly called a patient safety bundle, is not formally, not formerly, that's my Southern twang, formally called a patient safety bundle, is an organized series of evidence-informed actions and best practices for improving care processes and patient outcomes in pregnant and postpartum women and people, developed by a group of experts from different clinical disciplines. Examples of patient safety bundles include obstetric hemorrhage, severe hypertension in pregnancy, safe reduction of primary cesarean birth, cardiac conditions in obstetric care, and sepsis in obstetric care. A second gap was the absence of a theoretical framework that substantiated assumptions about Black women and the power relations, differentials, and dynamics that shaped how Black women show up, speak out, shut down, move, and make decisions in society and in the health systems. The third gap was the lack of historical context and conditions that explain the origins of anti-Black racism and anti-Black misogyny in the United States that manifested in the provisions and processes of contemporary hospital-based obstetric care. When thinking about the multiplicity of my positionality as a Black queer feminist Southern woman, a dissident community trained and practicing OBGYN, an OB hospitalist, an applied epidemiologist, a mixed methodologist, a survey developer, a paradigm leader, an infopreneur, and an improvement and implementation scientist, practitioner, and researcher. I made a conscientious decision to disrupt the obstetric patient safety paradigm by asking this one question: what if the experience is the outcome? Instead of prioritizing and measuring change in clinical pathology as the outcome of interest, I sought out to design the most accurate and precise measure of care experiences that best aligned with the feelings, thoughts, words, expectations, experiences, and expressions of Black women seeking help or health care during labor and birth and the immediate postpartum in hospital settings. This book demonstrates the application of a Black feminist praxis and precision medicine in obstetric quality measure development and validation. The six fundamental steps included in the making of a measure consist of: number one, determining the theoretical framework; number two, developing a preliminary conceptual model; number three, review existing measures to start developing an item bank; number four, design new items if needed; number five, revise your item bank with patient, community, and content experts; and six, pilot test and perform psychometric analysis. Maintaining fidelity to precision medicine and instrument validation means that before one can measure care outcomes by advancing quality, equity, and safety, one must first practice courageous curiosity to name, define, and describe particular harms experienced by Black mothers and birthing people and enacted by hospital clinicians, staff, and administrators against Black mothers and birthing people. Davis's online publication in December 2018 gave me permission to speak the truth with a greater sense of Black feminist, Davis's online publication in December 2018 gave me permission to speak truth to power about the egregious violations of obstetric quality and patient safety with a great sense of Black feminist pride, purpose, passion, and power. In this chapter, I describe the methodology for designing and conducting a Black feminist hermeneutic phenomenology of childbirth hospitalization based on the pregnancy, labor, birth, and immediate postpartum expectations, expressions, and experiences of Black mothers in Los Angeles and Oakland, California. First, I situate the discussion of quality of care within the larger context of the US-based patient safety literature and lexicon by introducing the reader to the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, which I will, moving forward, refer to as ARC. Second, I offer a high-yield overview of the importance of establishing a just culture and patient safety paradigm. Third, I discuss the limitations and hypocrisy of the existing patient safety paradigm, including the lack of transparency, rigor, relevance, responsiveness, and accountability. Fourth, I discuss three phenomena: the near eradication of Black grand midwives, the establishment of the Maternal Mortality Collaborative and subsequent pregnancy mortality surveillance system, and the March of Dimes 2023 report to illuminate the existence and exacerbation of a chronic and pervasive manufactured Black maternal and infant health crisis in the US. Fifth, I explain the challenges and limitations in prioritizing outcome-only measures as hospital performance indicators. Sixth, I describe the methodological approach to my research. And finally, I close this chapter one with the guiding principles of the Sacred Birth Framework. Hospitals, health plans, and quality organizations define safety as the absence of preventable harm in healthcare delivery. Existing patient safety literature from ARC, Patient Safety Network, or PSNet, a national web-based resource on patient safety, describes three concepts and definitions that inform the operationalization of reporting systems: adverse event, near miss, or error. An adverse event is defined as any unintended injury resulting from or contributed to by medical care or management, rather than the underlying disease, that requires additional monitoring or treatment, prolongs the hospitalization, produces a death or disability at the time of discharge, or all three. Identifying something as an adverse event does not imply error, negligence, or poor quality care. Labeling a care outcome as an adverse event simply indicates that an undesirable clinical outcome resulted from some aspect of diagnosis or therapy, not an underlying disease process. Subcategories of adverse events include preventable, those that occurred due to error or failure to apply an accepted strategy or for prevention; ameliorable, events that, while not preventable, could have been less harmful if care had been different; and neglectful or negligence, events that occur due to care that falls below the standards expected of clinicians in the community. Two additional terms define violations of patient safety that do not result in harm, where harm is traditionally and repeatedly defined by systems and structures of power within the patient safety field. One, near miss, an unsafe situation that is indistinguishable from a preventable adverse event except for the outcome, whereby a patient is exposed to a hazardous situation but does not experience harm either through luck or early detection. And error, a broader term referring to any act of commission, doing something wrong, or omission, failing to do the right thing, that exposes patients to a potentially hazardous situation. Within the context of maternal and pregnancy related health, the World Health Organization defines a near miss maternal morbidity as a pregnant woman or person who nearly died because of a complication that occurred during pregnancy, childbirth, or postpartum up to, up to 42 days after the end of a pregnancy. In decreasing order of severity from a near miss maternal morbidity, severe maternal morbidity, or SMM, as defined by the World Health Organization, represents any health condition attributed to and or aggravated by pregnancy and childbirth that has a negative impact on the woman's well-being. In comparison, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, define SMM as unexpected outcomes of labor and delivery that result in significant short or long-term consequences to a woman's health. And in decreasing order from SMM, the CDC defines maternal morbidity as an unexpected health condition attributed to or complicating pregnancy and childbirth that has a negative impact on well-being or functioning. In general, getting pregnant in the US results in 60,000 women or gender expansive individuals experiencing SMM and 700 pregnancy related deaths. Thus, for every one pregnancy related death in the United States, approximately 85 women or gender expansive individuals will experience a near miss, which means they almost die. Multiple studies demonstrate inequities in the rate of SMM based on race as a proxy to racism, age, region, community level income, and hospital type. The highest rates of SMM occurred among Black women and individuals, and women and individuals under the age of 20 or over the age of 40, residing in the Northeast and Southern states, living in the poorest communities, and experiencing childbirth in public hospitals. Additional data revealed worsening inequities in SMM based on race as a proxy for racism among Black women using both public and commercial insurance. The Commonwealth Fund analysis further revealed a pattern whereby women and individuals who experience an SMM are much more likely to be readmitted to the hospital during the postpartum period compared to women and individuals who did not experience SMM. Regarding cost, the Commonwealth presented data showing that births affected by SMM cost about 40% more than births without SMM, independent of public or commercial insurance, during the prenatal and postpartum periods of care provision. Similarly, the CDC asserts that the consequences of increasing SMM prevalence and health implications vary and include factors such as increased medical costs and duration of hospitalization. Thus, the CDC offers two strategies to reduce SMM prevalence: monitoring SMM trends and implementing interventions to improve the quality of maternal care. However, a host of challenges pose as barriers and burdens to reducing the rate of SMM, such as the absence of mandated reporting of SMM across birthing hospitals and community settings, such as birthing centers and home births, and a consensus on SMM definitions, measurements, monitoring strategies, and prevention and mitigation strategies. The most egregious examples of structural and institutional barriers to addressing SMM include the absence of courageous, curious, and disruptive leadership, ethics, knowledge, and science to name and address obstetric racism as a singular threat to curating, sustaining, and advancing a culture of obstetric quality and patient safety within and across U.S. birthing hospitals. Existing literature describes key components to establishing a culture of patient safety, such as operationalizing consistent safe practices, curating a blame free environment where reporting occurs without fear of retaliation, and promoting collaboration across disciplines and levels of power and positionality. Current evidence also describes ongoing threats to advancing patient safety, such as the variations in the perceptions of safety within and across health systems, poor teamwork and communication, a culture of low expectations, and power relations and dynamics. Despite safety culture definitions, safety measures, teamwork training, executive walkarounds or clinical debriefings, unit based safety teams, rapid response teams, and standardized communication methods during patient handoffs, provision of high quality, safe, and equitable care remains a major challenge for U.S. hospitals and health systems. The no blame spirit in the early patient safety movement may no longer best serve organizations, especially when certain errors are deemed blameworthy and demand accountability. For example, the CDC 2022 report found 84% of all pregnancy related deaths from 2017 to 2019 among residents of 36 states to be preventable. The current efforts must focus on establishing a just culture that reconciles the dual need for a no blame culture and appropriate personal accountability. According to Dr. Decker, a just culture within patient safety requires identifying and addressing systemic and structural factors that permit individuals within health systems to participate in unsafe language and behaviors while maintaining individual accountability by establishing zero tolerance for reckless behaviors. Dr. Decker also offers three distinctions as an alternative to the dominant no blame approach: human error or slips, at risk behavior, taking shortcuts, and reckless behavior, ignoring required patient safety steps. In a just culture, the unit, departmental, and organizational response to an adverse event, error, or near miss is determined by the type of behavior, regardless of intent, associated with the patient safety violation and not the severity of the event. For example, reckless behavior, such as a physician or nurse refusing to obtain informed consent prior to a vaginal cervical exam, would warrant disciplinary action even if the patient experienced a normal labor course and birth outcome, meaning absence of harm as defined by authoritative figures in patient safety. The implementation, spread, and scale of a just culture and patient safety paradigm in healthcare, particularly in hospital based obstetrics, without the historical and contemporary contextualization of racism as a well defined and measurable adverse event is irresponsible, unethical, inhumane, and unjust. The willful ignorance and exclusion of medical racism, obstetric violence, or obstetrical racism, regardless of intention, as a single threat or a series of ongoing threats to patient safety for Black women and reproducing capable people seeking help or health care for any pregnancy related reason, reifies the hierarchy of human value based on skin color, genitalia, and gender. More importantly, the systemic and structural exclusion and or erasure of Black patient experiences and community wisdom in shaping terminology, meanings, and measurement selection further silences the voices and undermines the agency and self-efficacy of Black mothers and birthing people in advancing quality and equity in patient safety. Consequently, the perpetrators of harm are then protected and even incentivized by the very system that's supposed to protect patients and hold individuals within the organization accountable for the provision of care in a just and safe culture of care. I'll do like 2 more minutes and then I'll stop. Standardized perinatal safety and quality measures primarily focus on physical outcomes, effectively excluding experiential, spiritual, and ancestral knowledge of patients and community wisdom. The structural and systemic exclusion of patient and community knowledge and experts limits the capacity of existing outcome measures to provide sound information about the safety of care provided to Black mothers and birthing people as defined for, by, and with Black mothers and birthing people. Thus, naming obstetrical racism as a patient safety indicator is an essential first step in the measurement, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting of harm as defined by patient and community knowledge in hospital performance. Yet the ahistorical and theoretical evaluation of quality in hospital-based obstetrics serves to procure and protect the interest, power, and spaces of predominantly white male physicians or quantitative data analysts. The security and sustainability of white male physician or white male physician positionality as epistemic gatekeepers require committed multi-level actions that facilitate the structural exclusion, erasure, and eradication of the intellectual thoughts and activism of Black women and people as patient and implementation science, practice, and research. Excuse me, I'm going to start over. The security and sustainability of white male physician or white male physician positionality as epistemic gatekeepers require committed multi-level actions that facilitate the structural exclusion, erasure, and eradication of the intellectual thoughts and activism of Black women and people as patient, community, and content experts. The fathers of obstetric quality improvement and implementation science, practice, and research follow in the steps of their brethren, the fathers of obstetrics and gynecology. And I'll stop. I will stay on until like 6:30-ish. But what questions or comments do you have? That is just a taste. I probably will do a part 2 of chapter 1 because I want to get at least to like page 18. But thank you for listening. Please ask any questions. Um, I'm going to go to the Mentimeter here, and you'll see the first question that was asked way at the beginning. Is there a way to hold medical personnel accountable for obstetric racism? And if so, what does that process look like? What action can pregnant people take? Uh, so there are lots of ways. The second part, I want to hold off on saying what pregnant people can take because it's not your responsibility. So I'm going to hold off on telling the victims of obstetric racism who are also the victors of quality and patient safety what you need to do. It really needs to be put back on the system and those who are licensed to provide health care. One way to hold the medical personnel accountable is by first, in all my in chapter 8, I actually provide multi-level solutions at the disciplinary, structural, I think interpersonal level. But if we actually go back, and I'll speak as an OBGYN medical professional, if we go back to our standards, our competencies that are actually in the residency, there's a book of standard competencies that we must achieve. They're usually driven around our cognitive processes, like how do we screen, diagnose, treat? How do we create a plan? How do we communicate? What are the interactions that we have during a clinical encounter? How do we facilitate communication in a robust, responsive, relevant way? How do we facilitate decision making with informed consent or informed refusal? And what does our charting and our communication look like in the documentation and dissemination of healthcare information in a patient handoff, sign out, and a health record? If we actually made obstetric racism an adverse event and actually a never event, then by definition, being an OBGYN, we would be trained with the competencies to not facilitate or exacerbate or initiate acts of obstetric racism. So we have to go back to the fact of how we were trained. Obstetric racism is nowhere in our council on residency education of obstetrics and gynecology called CREOG. In chapter 8 of my book, I actually break down the parts of the competencies where we could include like signs and symptoms of like the precursors of obstetric racism. So that is what I think about. Is like just starting with our training. Obstetric racism is not listed as an adverse event. So, for example, as surgeons, we do things to prevent the retention of a laparotomy sponge. It's called zero tolerance. We will, the cert or tech will count the instruments, usually with the nurse inside or with the surgeon or resident. We do the counts before the surgery. We do a second count during the surgery, and we do a third count before the surgeon closes. And if those counts are not correct times three, then we actually have to call it out. We start profusely, like immediately looking for the laparotomy sponge. Is it in the drape? Do we give it to the pediatrician when they took the baby away? Like everybody starts looking, anesthesiologists, everybody. And if it's not there, then we call radiology while we're in the OR, and they have to come into the room and take a picture, which is why we put a little blue tag on laparotomy sponges so that if it is retained in the abdomen and we take their radiologic image, then we can figure out where it is. And that's also why we shouldn't leave the OR unless the counts are correct times three. So that's just an example of how we try to preempt, right, retaining laparotomy sponges by doing these counts, right? By opening the instruments up if we have time. I have started surgeries really quickly without the initial count. And it is rough because we do have to do an imaging because it was a true emergency cesarean birth. But I am not going to share exactly what I'm going to working on now, but there's some folks that I'm working on that I'm working with to kind of adapt existing systemic responses to situations in the hospital where we know that being in the hospital does put one at risk for illness. So it's the same thing. Being in a hospital giving birth puts patients at risk for obstetrical racism. The same way that we do systemic responses, like if there's something happening in a patient room, independent of the patient's condition, their location, the team, the attending, the hospital has systems in place, right? Where they're collecting data, they're monitoring the data. And when two or more criteria are met, a whole team will come in to act. I am thinking about designing something like that. And those are just examples of what we could do, but I don't want to put it on the pregnant person because it's not your responsibility to protect yourself. That's what we're doing to doulas. We are putting doulas in in crossfire, I mean, in harm's way, and we really need to put the onus on on monitoring and mitigating, honestly, physician behavior. 88% of births are by physicians. 98% of births are in the hospital setting. 80% of the deaths are preventable. 53% of the deaths occur after hospital discharge, usually under the supervision of a physician. Instead of asking patients to speak up, we need to really control physician behavior and language. There are a lot of things that are being stated in the room to patients, to family members, that's being actually charted, that's perpetuating these harms because it's become standard. Um, Other questions? These are comments. I just want to share how beautiful it was to hear you sharing your words in your own voice. Thank you for this opportunity. I love the focus on experience and on the patient as the expert, on the meaning of what happened, patient as expert. Yes, I got that. And oh, there's a comment in the chat. Thank you for making me look at the chat. If anyone has any other questions in the Q&A, I'm going to look at the Q&A as well. It's on my screen, so I don't know. Julia, Cheyenne, you may have to read it out to me. My computer's going really slow.
I can read it. It's from Ginny saying
Mhm,
Black working people experience medical racism across the board. There is no differentiation based on education,
mhm,
socioeconomic status, or otherwise. However,
mhm.
folks who experience it the most are those without the information, resources, and self advocacy skills. How do we get this information to those people so they can know when this is happening to them? On the continuum of those who are most at risk to least at risk, the ones on the most at risk side are most vulnerable to the worst outcomes because they simply don't know. This has been my experience working in the hospital setting on labor and delivery. People don't even know injustice is happening to them.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And this actually includes people who are affluent. Here's my answer to that. What I found in my research, the qualitative component, as well as the quantitative and qualitative research, that for obstetric racism that we measured through the first and only validated patient-reported experience of obstetric racism called the PREM-OB scale, I was able to validate that measure. So translate the sacred birth quality framework, right, into it now a measurement with 815 Black mothers and birthing people across 348 hospitals and 34 states, including DC. Independent of any individual characteristic, income, education, pregnancy age, birth modality, even comorbidities, they all experience obstetric racism. So really, the risk factor is is birthing in a hospital setting and how the hospital responds to Blackness. Period. So everybody's at risk if you are being responded to in this country through anti-Black racism, anti-Black misogyny. Nothing is protective. Even the even affluent people who are Black women and gender expressive people experience it. Part of some of the challenges is that there's been such a long-standing history of being harmed that people don't even know when they're being harmed because they're so used to being harmed. Um, so what we, in terms of building, activating the patient autonomy, free will, their agency, free will with resources and decision-making capability, and then their self-efficacy, that their belief that they can make a change in obstetric racism, um, honestly is what Cheyenne and I are going to start sharing. Because of Cheyenne, we have illustrated clinical narratives for each domain. And my goal at the patient level and family level, community level, although it is not your responsibility, but I hear you, is that just helping people to understand um, two things at least. Donna's 6 dimensions of obstetric racism, which Donna has written, and the illustrations for that. And we can share resources to know that dismissiveness, neglect, disrespect is a manifestation of obstetric racism, to know that coercion, medical abuse, ceremonies of degradation when the hospital utilizes CPS, security, psych, when they feel when the system is threatened by patient and caregiver community agency and autonomy and assertiveness. Um, Diagnostic lapses. Like, yes, these things happen to people who are not Black, but when these happen to people who identify as Black, they internalize it and think it's happening to them because they are Black. Whereas a white person would more likely think that it's not their whiteness or their gender per se, that there's probably some incompetency with the hospital. So how do we build the capacity of patient caregivers and communities to recognize these 6 manifestations of obstetric racism, but also the 7 domains of sacred birth, where S stands for safety and accountability, A is for autonomy, C is for communication, information exchange, K is for kinship, R is for racism, E is for empathy and humanity, and D is for dignity and Blackness and holistic care. Part of it is inviting to this book series. I mean, this is a big textbook. I mean, it's a lot of words. It's an academic book published by an academic press. The price is like a college textbook. So that's part of the reason why I'm doing these online virtual series for each chapter so that the public can be more engaged if they can't afford the book. We're going to also be doing more of these talks this year because the book is out. So that's one thing, is just the public awareness. If you can ask community organizations to send patient caregivers and family members to our convenings in person and online, I really try my best to distill the information in a way for patients care. When I say caregiver, I mean still community, not healthcare people, for patients, their caregivers, and their chosen and given community members to be able to like identify and recognize it, and then ways they can be supported, contacting Birth and Culture Rigor, Elephant Circle. We are supporting families in, of course, prior to this administration, but we're still doing it in listening to their stories, writing their stories, and translating their stories into a discrimination report that goes to the Office of Civil Rights. Again, pre this administration, we were doing that. And, these quality violations are truly not only quality and patient safety violations, they're human rights violations. So it's important that the public knows this so they can know this not just I was dismissed, I was not heard, I wasn't seen. That is a violation of your human right to be treated with dignity and respect, and that your autonomy be activated, protected, and amplified, even if you say no, and there should be no acts of retaliation. That's in the nursing code of ethics, that's in the medical code of the ethics, where the systems are just not holding licensed professionals accountable. That was a long answer. Um, but yes, and it's 6:27. We're like 8 minutes or so over. Any other comments or questions? Please sign up. The Educated Birth, we're doing this for every chapter, so more patients, caregivers, communities can come. Reach out to your philanthropic foundations and ask them for a donation. Um, with the devastation and dismantling all of the federal funds, a lot of philanthropic foundations, this is their opportunity to truly support patients and caregivers and community folks. Yes, we need doulas and midwives, birthing centers. We need to support folks birthing at home, and we still need to support the 98%. They're still birthing in hospitals, whether by forced choice or coercion. And one way is this language. Like, how do we get this language out there to the public and that they know that they have rights? But I really want to make sure that we also begin to hold health systems, insurance companies accountable to preventing and mitigating obstetric racism. Does anyone have anything else that they would like to say before we log off? Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm looking at some of the comments. You can, if you would like these comments and questions, I can send them out to you. They're in Mentimeter. And I will see you all next time. This is just a snippet. I will keep these questions. I will answer them the next time. I really am just trying to figure out a way for the public to be engaged in this work, and also the professionals across disciplines and industry, community, and academia. But I know because my work is on obstetrical racism, you may not see me in certain places. So I just want to be the first to host my own book series. I am an unconventional independent scholar who was invited by the academic press to write this book. That is an academic book, but I wrote it really to demonstrate to my people, meaning that my people being the physicians, OBGYNs, that we just have to do better. And this book clearly outlines the ways that we've been professionalized to behave in ways that reproduce not only the beliefs, but the behaviors that date back to antebellum, anti-Black racism, and misogynoir, since chattel slavery and beyond. So it is for everybody, but it is my love letter to my OBGYNs to get it together. And I need you all to help us to do that. So see you next time. The next one will be April 28th, 29th, or the 30th. I will look at your votes to see during that time period. You can know how to find us at BCR_Nashville on Instagram, and you know how to find me on Instagram, Facebook. But yeah, we'll be back for chapter 2. I may finish the last. I gotta think about this. I'll read for longer. We'll probably go for an hour. But I'm trying to decide if I want to finish up part 1 or just go to part 2. And I'm also open if there's certain excerpts you would like for us to read aloud or certain narratives. As you go through the book, I actually just put the dialogue in there. There are so many times where the dialogue facilitated transformation of people's consciousness in real time that I felt it was very important to insert whole dialogue like a script in the book and not just excerpts. So you can use the index, which I love, Thank you, Don, for helping me with that. There are words in here that if you want me to read about those certain things in these chapters, let me know. But the index was designed for you to find those words on those page numbers. I talk about genocide in chapter 1. Um, I talk about the Civil Rights Congress. I talk about antebellum ideology. So, yes, please use the index also as a way to help me focus some of these online book readings and discussions. So, see you all next time. Bye. I'm just going to hang on to the very end, but you all are welcome to leave if you like.
Thank you, Karen. I just wanted to pop on and echo all the thanks and gratitude coming up in the chat. I'm not able to put the link into the chat. It
Can
hasn't been.
you can you email it to me or text it to me and I'll try to do it? Yeah.
Yeah, so we can follow up. But please let us know. We're going to send a link to a brief survey so that you can just let us know what you thought of today and any feedback that you have. And that's really helpful. And we'll include in a follow-up email the links again. If you scroll up to the top of the chat, you should still be able to see the link to where you can buy the book with the special discount as well. So yeah, thank you. It's an honor for myself and the Educated Birth to participate in this with you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you at the end of April. And yes, you can please purchase the book. You get 30% off if you buy directly from the publisher. It is also available in major outlets online and in person. You just won't get the discount. But thank you, everyone.